Good morning, everyone. FDR delivered the Four Freedoms speech in January of 1941, a moment similar to now, when tyranny was spreading across the globe. And he articulated a thesis of democracy built around four freedoms: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. And all of our freedoms are currently under attack from this federal administration. New Yorkers feeling that as they are bound down by costs, bound down by fear. And this past week, we saw an illustration of that authoritarian administration and their attack on these freedoms, as they showcased once again an attack on the First Amendment. ABC pulled Jimmy Kimmel off the air after the FCC sought to pressure them. And the parent companies, Nexstar and Sinclair, put the decision of their merger and the factors that they are considering as part of that in front of those very freedoms and that very First Amendment right. And we have to understand who suffers in these moments. It's not just a question of Jimmy Kimmel himself. It's also a question of the many workers who find their livelihoods from that job. Be they sound engineers, be they the writers, be they the musicians. This attack on the freedom of expression is also an attack on their ability to afford to live in the city that they call home. And the message that it sends to each and every American across this country is a message the First Amendment is no longer a right that can be counted on, but rather that it is government which will determine what should and should not be discussed, what can and cannot be spoken. And we cannot normalize these kinds of acts nor offenses. These must be the basis upon which we act. Act to protect the freedoms that we hold so dear. Act to stand up for the values that make us so proud to be Americans. And so I'm here today to announce that I am withdrawing from an ABC Town Hall that was scheduled to take place this Thursday. And I am withdrawing not as an indictment of the local affiliate or the hardworking journalists there, but rather in response to the corporate leaders who have put their bottom line ahead of their responsibility in upholding the freedom of the press. And I'm eager to take questions from the public, committed to taking another town hall in the weeks to come, and also cognizant of the responsibility that all of us have in this moment to showcase just how unacceptable these kinds of actions are. How unacceptable it is that we are living in a moment where Donald Trump's actions are the ones which determine whether or not we can enjoy that which we have taken for granted for so many years. And I think, as we are here in this very park, of the quote that FDR shared with us decades ago, where he said, "We must especially beware of that small group of selfish men who would clip the wings of the American eagle in order to feather their own nests." We cannot be free if we are subservient to those who abuse power for their own ends. We cannot understand this moment of authoritarianism as solely coming from the White House when it is also a moment that is characterized by the cowardice of those in response to it. The cowardice that we have seen typified whether by the parent company of ABC or by so-called leaders like Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams. A cowardice because they are looking to the White House for their path to their future ambitions. And we know that none of these freedoms, be they the freedom of expression, be they the freedom of worship, be they the freedom from want, from fear, can be separated from one another. And we know that we are only as free as the least free among us. And I will use my power as the mayor to fight those who seek to divide us, those who seek to abuse their power, those who seek to take away our freedom. Because it is not the government's job to bully talk show hosts off of the air. It is not the government's job to tell us what we can and cannot talk about. The government's job is to deliver a dignified life, to make our cities safe, to make them affordable, to make sure that this is a place where all 4 of those freedoms are lived out each and every day. And I am running to be the next mayor of this city to live up to that responsibility and to finally make clear what it looks like to stand up, not just for this city, but also for the Constitution that we hold so dear. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take on-topic questions first, and I'll give the first one to NJ if you want it. You're all right. Okay. Any on-topic questions about the town hall? Yes, right here, Roosevelt Island.
Yeah, hi. Would you replace the town hall with one here on Roosevelt Island, the home of Four Freedoms Park? As a Roosevelt Island resident, I'm asking that also.
I appreciate the advocacy for Roosevelt Island. I can tell you that we are considering a number of town halls to come, and this very island has actually been a part of the advocacy of our campaign, where we just shot a video on the other side of it speaking about Nellie Bly and the work that was done in showcasing what was once deemed impossible as something that can actually be a roadmap, and I continue to look forward to engaging with the residents of this very island as we make that case.
As an Astoria resident, have you been to Roosevelt Island often?
Many a time, many a time. It has been a place where I have found time for a walk, time for a bike ride, and also time to tap into the history of the city, one that we often forget as it actually charts out what's possible here.
Okay. Any more on-topic questions? No on-topic questions. Okay, Andrew, go ahead.
Over the weekend, Andrew Cuomo posted a video in which he's engaging in a bet with a Muslim New Yorker who says there's no way Zohran Mamdani would ever back legalization of prostitution. And Cuomo says, I'll bet you he will. And this social media ad, uses a clip of you seeming to do that. So can you clarify for that voter and for New Yorkers whether you do support the legalization of prostitution and what you make of Cuomo's assertion?
I have never supported the legalization of prostitution, and I find it quite ironic to see Andrew Cuomo speak about betting in a mosque. Gambling is something that goes against the tenets of Islam, and to speak about that in a mosque showcases such an ignorance of the faith and showcases the fact that his intent in going to the second mosque, maybe in more than a decade, is one where he seeks to lecture as opposed to listen. And I'm proud to have visited more than 60 mosques myself over the course of this campaign, to be running a campaign that is engaged with far more mosques over that same time period, and to go there with a vision that speaks to all New Yorkers, but also to go there to listen to those same New Yorkers. Because Muslim New Yorkers want what every New Yorker wants and deserves, which is to be treated with respect and to be understood as belonging to the very fabric of this city. And so often, the concerns that I hear from my fellow Muslim New Yorkers are concerns around their ability to afford this city. You know, I speak to so many at these mosques where I hear concerns about their ability to pay their rent, concerns about their ability to make an honest living here. And all of this amidst an understanding that so much of what I have gone through over the course of this campaign is what many of these very Muslim New Yorkers go through in their own lives. Having to go to a workplace and deal with someone who intentionally mispronounces your last name day after day. Having to be denied the basic dignity of what it means to be seen as someone who is just as New York as anyone else. And I would encourage Andrew Cuomo to not just continue going to mosques and engaging with Muslim New Yorkers as they deserve in the same manner of any other New Yorkers, but also to listen to those same New Yorkers. Because as someone like himself who is engaged in Islamophobic rhetoric, who has described the first Muslim Democratic nominee for mayor of this city in a language of being a terrorist sympathizer, in language more befitting an animal than a person, and with ads that artificially lengthen the beard that I have, it is time that he actually listens to the community as opposed to lectures anyone about anything.
Yeah, NJ.
Yes, off topic. Yes. How do you, I understand that what you were suggesting with regard to prostitution is decriminalizing sex work. How is that different from legalizing prostitution? Explain it.
These are fundamentally different things, and what I've always spoken about is that my intended outcome is public safety and measuring any of these policies by what they actually deliver to New Yorkers. And what we saw in the previous mayoral administration was an approach that was geared much more to the question of safety than the question of theater. And that is what is a guiding light for me, is to ensure that we are not simply trying to perform responsiveness to the concerns of New Yorkers, but we are addressing these concerns and ensuring that we are keeping each and every New Yorker safe. And I think that's what the previous administration showed far more than the current one.
How does that translate into policy?
Well, I think it translates into the question of what do you view as the symptoms and what do you view as the responses that you should take to these very issues. And what we've seen is from the previous administration an understanding that the responses that have to be taken have much more to do with things beyond the question of an individual sex worker and through the larger system around that. And I think that that's an important part. And what I would also just add here is this is also a conversation that is one motivated by evidence, motivated by policy, and we find a lot of these same findings even from the United Nations working group on this very topic as to what will create the most amount of safety for the most people.
Okay, I think we've answered this question twice in a row now, different topic.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Does this mean, actually, can you just clarify, do you support people who are selling sex not being charged?
I think he just answered this question in the previous question.
I support the previous administration's approach to this, the policies that they pursued on this.
Does this mean you're not going to do anything with ABC going forward if they host mayoral debates, or is this a sort of ban until they correct what happened?
I will continue to engage with the hardworking journalists of ABC and continue to respect the work that they do in covering this city, and also think that in our decision as to where would be our first televised town hall, there is a responsibility as to what we show is acceptable conduct from the parent company and where we choose to spend our time and our platform.
And Mayor Adams last week talked about revoking DOE policy about the use of gender bathrooms. That came after the Trump administration threatened to remove several $1 million. I'm wondering, are you still seeing that in line with sort of what you're talking about in terms of the removal of freedoms?
Am I still seeing that attack?
Do you see that attack as part of what you talked about here today?
I do. I think it not only showcases the Trump administration's agenda, but also the willingness from Eric Adams, and frankly, oftentimes the eagerness from the Adams administration to serve as an accomplice to that very agenda, as a collaborator to that agenda. And to spend this moment in time seeking to amplify these transphobic attacks from the administration, it's indicative of a mayor and an administration that cares little for the actual wants and needs of New Yorkers, instead seeking to engage in assisting an administration that is looking to tear apart the very fabric of the city. I mean, we are talking about a moment where Donald Trump has just ushered through the legislation that will be the largest wealth transfer from working class Americans to the 1%, and will do so by throwing off hungry Americans from SNAP benefits, by throwing off sick Americans from their health insurance. And amidst all of that, amidst making it even more difficult to afford the most expensive city in the United States of America, we have a mayor that is looking to litigate bathrooms. It shows not only how deeply out of step he is, how willing he is to throw trans New Yorkers under the bus, but also just how far he has come from his own statements, his own words many years ago. And all of this in service of his own ambition.
Yeah, Mariella.
Mariela, no, Yolanda.
Oh, Yolanda, I'm so sorry.
Yolanda Telemundo, yes. Mr. Mamdani, the homeless is a big problem now more than before in New York City. Every neighborhood that you go, you see a lot of homeless and people all over the place. What will you do if you become a mayor? Because there's so many neighborhoods that are really, really concerned right now. I would like to hear about, to tell them what is going on.
Thank you for your question, Yolanda. And it speaks to the fact that we have the highest records of homelessness we've seen since the Great Depression. And we know that to fully understand this moment in time, we also have to understand what led up to it. And when Andrew Cuomo was leading the state, he cut funding for the Advantage program, a program that was critical at tackling homelessness. and we have seen a rise in homelessness since that decision. Today, there is an estimate that more than 4,000 New Yorkers are living on subway platforms across this city. And we know that that is nearly the same number of vacant supportive housing units within this same city. And it is an illustration of the fact that so much of this can also be explained by the lack of political will and interest in actually tackling these issues and in ensuring that the services that we are funding and creating are actually being provided to those who are in dire need of them. And additionally, we know that the greatest cause of homelessness, one of the greatest causes of homelessness in our city, is the rising rents of this city. We cannot decouple these two issues from them. And that's why we have so much of a focus of using every tool at our disposal to not only freeze the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers, but also to build housing at a scale that we haven't seen in this city for quite some time, such that we can ensure that we are taking every action to tackle the homelessness crisis through all of the different tools at our disposal.
Yeah, Sam, right here from NBC National.
I'm curious on the ABC decision. What did you make of some
Sorry,
of
would you mind speaking a little bit louder?
Sure. I'm sorry, I got a truck.
No worries.
What did you make of in light of the decision, some of the conservative voices that have come out, whether it's Ted Cruz or Rand Paul, who have impugned the FCC for the pressure that you just described? And do you think there will be more Republicans that will potentially take that step in the days to come?
You know, I hope to see that, but I'm not holding my breath. And I think this is something that should concern all Americans, no matter of their party, because we often hear from Republicans about their desire for a smaller government, for less of an intervention in people's lives, as they put it. And yet here we have a Republican president whose FCC is seeking to intimidate the media and looking to use their regulatory powers as the means of doing so. This should offend all of us, because to be a leader, it means to encounter speech that you hate, speech that you disagree with, speech that you oppose. It does not, however, mean to use the powers of that leadership to then stifle that same speech. I'm running to represent all 8.5 million people in this city. There are undoubtedly people who will disagree with me, who will come up to me, who will yell at me, who will shout at me. That's part of what this job means. It cannot mean that I look at those same people and say, these are the freedoms that I must stifle, these are the freedoms I must repress. That is what it means to live in a society, is to engage with that disagreement. And to look to stifle it, it just showcases a complete betrayal of so much of what is the bedrock of this country and our ability to actually live out these freedoms.
Joe.
How's it going, Joe?
Good.
I feel bad, you're always...
This is my perch, you know, I like to be right here, I get good audio.
Alright.
I was wondering if you could react to several U.S. allies recognize their plans to recognize Palestinian statehood. And could you talk a little bit about maybe how you feel this would distinguish you from your editors that they always?
You know, the candidate that is closest to me in the polls, Andrew Cuomo, there are many things that distinguish us. One of which is his decision to serve on Benjamin Netanyahu's legal defense team. A decision to look at the genocide that we've seen in Gaza and choose to defend the man responsible for it. And New Yorkers know that this is a race about the future of this city. It's a race about the welfare of the people who call this city their home, and that the focus of any mayor of the city has to be on those same New Yorkers. And they also want to see a politics that is consistent. And what I've heard from so many New Yorkers is that they are tired of a politics of exception, of one when they do not know if someone believes in freedom and justice and safety before they ask as to whom it applies to. And what I offer to those New Yorkers is that consistency, a belief in that universality. And I also know that this is not a hypothetical concern for many New Yorkers. You know, a few months ago, I met a Palestinian New Yorker who told me that 85 members of her family had been killed by the Israeli military in Gaza. How do you even understand the depth of that despair? And to know our complicity as Americans in funding that, it should be an affront to all of us. And even as we are here speaking about ABC and Jimmy Kimmel, we know that the attack on the freedom of expression is not limited solely to these institutions and individuals. It is also affecting New Yorkers in their own lives. And I think about a Palestinian New Yorker by the name of Mahmoud Khalil, who is recently facing a judgment from an immigration judge that is calling for his deportation either to Algeria or Syria. Never mind the fact that he's a New Yorker who is married and raising a young child in this city. Never mind the fact that he has had to spend months in detention for the crime seemingly of uttering an expression of solidarity with the struggle for Palestinian human rights. This is what it looks like to see this attack on freedoms of expression. And so to stand up against these attacks, it means at once standing up for the right of someone like Jimmy Kimmel to be able to say whatever it is that comes to their mind when they're on the air, and the right of someone like Mahmoud Khalil to stand in solidarity with the fight for Palestinian human rights. These are all intertwined as one fight together.
So what's your reaction to this idea that these allies are going to recognize statehood?
You know, I think any recognition of the dignity of Palestinians is something that I welcome. I think that the most urgent focus should be from these allies and from our own federal government to stop this genocide. We are seeing one Palestinian child having been killed every hour for more than a year. We are seeing a scale of devastation that many of us cannot comprehend. And I think that recognition of dignity is important, and yet the most important thing is to stop the suffering.
Okay, we've got time for one more. Yeah, Gloria.
Zohran, we've talked to some business leaders and some previous public servants that have worked across different administrations, and there's been a consistent thing that comes up, and that's them questioning whether or not you're doing enough to lay the groundwork to make sure your administration is ready if you win. Can you give us a little bit of insight into how you are preparing? I think you're pretty confident that you're going to win in November. Can you give us a little bit of a window into what that process looks like, as you clearly are still very much on campaign mode, balancing those two priorities? And can you give people who are looking at you and thinking, he doesn't have the experience, he doesn't have the amount of time working in government to be able to hit the ground running?
You know, I am someone who now understands what Andrew Cuomo felt like a few months before the election in leading this race. And also, I don't want to understand what Andrew Cuomo felt like on the night of that primary, where those polls showed that they didn't count for much. And so I'm spending each and every day looking to earn the support of New Yorkers and not looking at these polls as permission to take this election for granted. This is one that we will earn, one that we will win every single day. And that is why we continue to campaign across the 5 boroughs. That's also why we look at a historic 52,000 person strong volunteer team and say that we need to actually increase the numbers of our volunteers. And we're proud to say that we're confident we will reach 90,000 volunteers by election day. And we will knock on an additional 1.5 million doors. And we will do this because we know that our affordability agenda is one that resonates not just with Democrats. It resonates with independents, it resonates with Republicans, because your landlord doesn't care about your politics when you have to pay the rent every month. The MTA doesn't care about your politics when you have to pay $2.90. The city doesn't care about your politics when it creates a system such that you're paying $25,000 a year for childcare. And so that continues to be our focus. And I am deeply cognizant of the fact that we cannot afford a transition into this next mayoral administration that requires learning on the job. It is one that I am confident we will deliver from the very first day, an understanding of the challenges ahead of us and what's needed. And I've been thankful for the many meetings that I've had with civic leaders, whether having served in City Hall or outside of it, over the last many months, in informing our approach and preparation. Leaders such as Maria Torres Springer, such as Dan Doctoroff, Steve Houlihan, so many who have spoken about their own reflections in what it means to lead city government and what it means to ensure that that is a government defined by excellence and by outcome. Because we got to this point of this campaign by having that be our driving force, by having that be the way that New Yorkers measure the work that we do. That's how we also want to be measured when we're in city.
Thank you guys so much.